I terminated the contract. I was so proud of myself, but very sad because now I really felt lost. Where do I go from here? What's next for me? At the time, I just remember this is the pivotal moment. I talked to my dad and I was crying and I just was like, I thought this was my next step. And he was just like, daughter in Spanish, he was like, this wasn't the right place for you. And that's when the thought entered about a different market. And that's when I talked to you.
Welcome to today's episode of the Lady Landlords Podcast. Today we are bringing you one of my favorite types of episodes, which is actually a Lady Landlords member story. So I have Jen Cañas joining me today. Jen, how you doing?
Good. It's so good to see you. Glad
I
to
know.
be here.
You've had so much stuff happening lately, so I'm happy to reconnect with you and get a little caught up about what's going on with all the things that we've been working on over the past month. So thank you. I appreciate your time with joining us today. But I always like to start by having our members just give a quick introduction of who you, Jen, is behind the real estate investor.
Love it. Yes. So, hi everyone. I'm Jen and I am a proud mom of two kiddos. So, I have my son and my beautiful daughter-in-law, and then also my beautiful daughter. And so, definitely proud of them. And then outside of that, I'm a CPA. I work full time in accounting, and I'm a dog mom and a cat mom. And I love tennis and running and all the goodness that comes with that.
Actually, I feel like most of the time we've talked, I've either seen a dog or a cat run across screen.
Oh,
So maybe they will visit us again today.
probably. We will have an appearance, I'm sure, by one of them. So.
Right. Well, good. I appreciate that. So you said accounted by day here. Where did real estate and investing even enter the picture and all of that?
So my dad has been in real estate for many, many years. I've just watched him in the background, right? Just kind of observing what he's been doing. During COVID, I was just contemplating like what life would look like, what would excite me. And I've been behind spreadsheets for so many years. And I love the idea of real estate, like actually getting out and talking to people. And so I was like, this is something that I'd be interested in. So I got my license during COVID. That was December of 2020. And at that point, I had my home and then I had an investment property. And so I knew that there was an opportunity for me to represent myself on my deals. And then it's become also very lucrative for my family, being able to provide that and help my family with that too. So I got my license and I'm with an amazing broker now. And so, yeah, that's how I kind of got started in real estate.
Now, was your dad an investor or a realtor?
Both. Yeah, doing both. And so he's been doing some rehab work and he does a lot of things in a lot of different areas. He's a project manager by day. He now has his broker license and then also does rehab and he's a property manager. I mean, I'll keep going. But if you ever
Right.
wonder why I do all these things, you can just look to my dad.
Right. Just very active. That's really
Very
cool. And
nice.
I know so many women and lady landlords want to get into real estate investing to have then their children see what they accomplished or see what they grew and see that they went after kind of their dreams and what they're looking for. So it's really
Yeah,
interesting that you were that kid that had the modeling really from your father.
right. Exactly. Yeah.
Is this something you hope your kids get into?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
My kids have already haven't, they're dabbling in it and that's their story. I'll let them, share that. But
Very
yeah,
cool.
they're already kind of getting started in their own way. And so it's a beautiful thing for sure.
Did the want to become a realtor or the want to become a real estate investor come first?
Well, the investor came first. Okay. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad many years ago and my numbers brain, right? Like
Mhm.
the money part, I was like, this makes sense. I saw it. At the time, me and my now ex-husband, we were just on different wavelengths when it came to that. And
Mhm.
so after the divorce, I bought my first property. And when I say after, I mean like 2 months after. And then that same year, I got an investment property. I mean, it was just like,
Huh.
I'm doing this. So investor came first. And actually, I really got my license for my own deals. That's always have been the motivation.
Gotcha. So hold on, I want to just mention one thing. I love the fact that you bought that property right after the divorce. And here's why. I was actually in an article in New York Times a couple years ago for Lady Landlords, which was like a dream of mine, especially as a New Yorker, to always be in the New York Times. But Lady Landlords was in the New York Times talking about how women really bought real estate almost as like a self-care type perspective. And they were talking about how a lot more women are realizing that we need to make sure to have our own monies, our own income stream, our own side hustles. And one of the most popular topics that they talked about in that article, I'll make sure to link that down in the episode notes. But one of the most important things there was a lot of women, when they went through a divorce, then started investing in real estate because of that. So that's really interesting that actually you fall into that category.
Yes. I mean, I always wanted to make sure that I was safe, right? Like that's been a
Right.
big part for me lately. And when it comes to financial safety, real estate, I've seen it in my own life, right? In other transactions that I've done, in my marriage and then outside of my marriage. And it's
Hmm.
always been good to me. Like I
Yeah.
don't have a transaction that I can look back and be like, oh, that didn't work out so well. No. And so I've already seen like the benefit of it. And
Hmm.
now that I'm progressing in it, I mean, I'm still like seeing even more. It's just really beautiful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We talk about this debate. So now that we're on this call, we're going to have to kind of memorialize you in this part of the episode here. We always talk about if a real estate investor should also be a realtor. What is your opinion on that?
Okay, so from my perspective,
Yeah.
hands down, absolutely. I mean, I get to learn the rules, right? When it comes to our state laws, right? When it comes to real estate. For me, I have an investor friendly broker, which means that I have the support of a brokerage that says, yes, you go get your own deals. Yes, if you want to be an investor, fine. If you want to be on the retail side and sell properties or help the buyers, fine.
Hmm.
It didn't look that way my first go round with my first broker. They wanted me to work full time as a real estate agent. And I'm just like, I'm an accountant. I have a, this is my career. I mean, so now that I'm with them and they have regular meetings and trainings, I feel much more supported. And to be able to get a check at closing, now I work really hard for that, right? So it's
Hmm.
not like it just comes, right? I have to represent myself and make sure I do my due diligence. But it has been really rewarding at closing to also get the commission for the work that I've done. So in addition to whatever we negotiated during the contract.
Right. And that's also something, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes here, but that was also something that could kind of be worked into a deal in a certain couple ways that was actually helpful. So, like I said, we'll come back to that in a few minutes.
Okay.
So, when we had met, you already had your primary residence, a rental property, correct? Or you
When we
had
met,
the two units.
I had, when we met, I had moved into a new duplex. So it's kind of house hacking, and we'll talk about that. All right.
Hmm.
So when we started working together, I had the two single family homes and then the duplex, and I was living in one unit
Right.
and
So,
not sure what I was doing at the other unit.
so what was it that made you say, like, hey, at this place, so you already had success, you were a realtor, you had your father, right, who was also in the industry here. What made you say, hey, it's time for me to get a little outside support?
So I was living in a different city. I had just moved away from the city where I had raised my children. And now I'm living in San Antonio. And my dad was 3.5 hours away. And while we could talk, it wasn't boots on the ground. Right. And so what was happening is I bought the duplex and I had furnished it. The idea was that it was going to be short term rental
Hmm.
and had a decorator come help me because, by the way, I'm a numbers brain, not a design brain. Colors, no thank you. Numbers, I have it all day long. So it looked very cute, had it listed on all the sites. And because I was living downstairs, it made it really challenging to have it be a revolving door, right? And different guests and different needs. So my first one was a medium term rental, and she left it a mess. I mean, it wasn't anything where it was like major theft or chaos or loss, but it was
Hmm.
enough to rattle me. Just, like food left on the stove. It was really challenging and working full time, and so then I decided to hire a property manager. And so
Hmm.
I did that. Well, that didn't work out. It wasn't as lucrative as I thought because at the time it was very overly saturated where I was in my market. So I just let it sit there. I was like, you know what? I'm not doing this. I'm going to pause. But I
Yeah,
knew that wasn't right. And so I was a little disheartened because the original plan that I thought it was going to look like didn't come to fruition. I paid, X amount of dollars to furnish it, to get the decorator, to get the pictures, and it was just sitting there.
right.
And I knew I had an ultimate goal of getting 5 doors. And so I was at this point 2 doors in the single family home, and I wouldn't even call the upstairs unit a door because it was just
It
sitting
was
there.
empty. Right. What's the point of having a door if it's not rented, if there's nobody in it, if it's not income producing?
No.
That was not. And honestly, Jen, I hear that a lot from other people, not just with like oversaturated markets, but just kind of in general about the risk with, once again, a short-term rental, midterm rental, is that now you go, you spend, usually it takes extra time. So maybe now you lose a month's rent really going out and doing those. I feel like a lot of people don't factor those costs also into their deal analysis, right? They say, okay, well, hey, it's going to cost me this much to acquire property. This is what I can make from a cash flow perspective. But they don't think about really the thousands of dollars it usually takes to set something up to really be somebody's home. There's just certain things that you have to think about, especially with the short term and the medium term rental that you just don't within long term rentals. So that's interesting then that you kind of found yourself in that position of great, you even hired a decorator to do those things, and then now it just sat there.
It just sat there. And so I was really frustrated and I believe in coaches, right? I believe in the value of coaching. And so I knew I needed help. And I was just I wasn't actively looking, but then I was already a part of Lady Landlords. And then I had already heard about you offering coaching. And so I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? I'm just going to inquire. Let me just
Right.
find out. And it was a frustration of not being where I wanted to be, and then also just knowing that I'm losing the potential income from upstairs because I'm frustrated at what I thought was gonna happen and it didn't.
Right. I felt that way when we first started kind of working together, was that there were still a lot of like unknowns kind of like in your life and a lot of kind of unknowns with certain spaces. But I could tell that you were like, I need change. I need something to like work out, something to kind of like come through. But almost that you were boxed in a little bit and
Yeah,
we're trying to like break through, but you couldn't find like the weak spot like in the wall or the door to kind of like get through. I remember you being in a very frustrated, kind of stuck place, right?
absolutely. I remember one of the first things that you told me, it was the light bulb that went off. You were just like, because I was telling you about all my goals and my plans, and you're just like, great. And you listened to me and you were so patient. And then you said, okay, but first things first. And this is a New Yorker in you, right? You were like, first things first, we got to get upstairs rented. I was like, yes, thank you. I mean, I needed that, but I needed to be given the permission to pivot, right? And
Right,
that's where I was like, you know what? Short-term rental is not working for me while I live here. And medium-term rental, it's just, I mean, it works for some people, but for me, I know the long-term rental space, right? Like I've been doing
right.
it for years. And so, giving me the permission to pivot and being like, no, we need to focus on this right now.
Thank you. There's something else that I want to bring up that I actually also really enjoyed, and I felt like we did a lot in our sessions that I wanted to talk about. But I feel like that, and not just you, but I do feel like I see, even reading all of the posts like in Lady Landlord sometimes, all day long I'm sitting there being like, whoa, this person's like 17 steps ahead or thinking of these things that may never possibly might happen. When meanwhile I'm like, but we're missing the thing like really in front of us. So, and I get that, and I get in that space sometimes myself where I'm like, but wait, what am I going to do about this? What am I going to do about this? What am I going to do about this? But then it's like, no, but like really, I have to deal with the thing that's directly in front of me. So I'm glad that I was able to help with that focus and really put those things in place. And the second part of that was also I realized that you had money sitting there. We wanted to bring that in. And that's something else that I feel like I see often is really those missed opportunities. I can't tell you how often I talk to somebody and they're like, well, I got to go buy another property. I'm like, cool, but what do you already have? oh, well, I have this, but it's kind of in rehab and this, but it's been vacant for a few months. I got to get a listing up. I'm like, whoa, why are we buying more property when we actually have property, but it's yet not bringing that money?
Right.
And I'm quite sure what we did with you was we kind of put in a little bit of a two-pronged approach, kind of saying like, cool, if it actually does rent for a midterm or short term, okay, cool, let's go for it. But let's at
Mhm.
least start the process of seeing how it works with as a long-term rental, and let's see if we can get somebody in because our numbers worked kind of either way. So it was like, cool, let's put a couple extra stokes in the fire to see what happens.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I did. I put feelers out there for both, right? It was like, okay, which one was going to hit first, the medium term or the long term? And
Right.
it was the long term, which turned out to be beautiful. Now I left it furnished, which was great.
Right.
They wanted it furnished, which was a good thing because then I would have had to figure out what to do with the beautiful furnishings. I didn't have to worry about that. So that's
Good. And then the second thing that I thought we actually did very often in our sessions, still with some transitions that were going on in your life, is I often asked you to kind of brain dump on me. I remember kind of saying on a few of our calls, like, Jen, just like give me everything in your mind and
yeah.
then let me organize it, prioritize it, kind of talk about what we really need to focus on and what we'll focus on in one of our next sessions, right? Just so that way we can kind of create that clear list. And one of the things that I remember you saying in like our first call together, I hate house hacking.
Oh,
Right?
yes.
You did not you were like, "I am not doing this. This
Nope.
is off the table. I don't like it." House hacking, for those that are not familiar, is the idea of living in a multifamily property where you live in one unit and rent out the other, so that extra income starts to help pay off some of that mortgage, or even to have a single family or your own apartment and rent out other rooms, once again, really diverting that full cost from yourself. So it's a very popular way that we get started as lady landlords. It's how I actually got started within real estate investing, but you hated it. What did you hate about house hacking?
Well, in the short-term rental space, I did not like the revolving door. I remember one time there was this couple and they brought a dog who had separation anxiety. And so when they left, the dog barked, and it was a big dog, right? So the dog was so loud, it barked the whole time when they were gone. And I just remember thinking, I can't do this. This is not working for me, and just all of it, right? Like, I just never
Right.
felt settled with it. I was just like, I miss having my space, and then I'm tiptoeing, and then my little dog's yappy, and then I'm
Yeah.
trying to get him, quiet, and so I felt like I never could play music loud, and I felt very restricted, different from having a single family home.
Right.
Yeah,
So that was our original plan. You were going to look in San Antonio, look for a new single family home for you. We kind of had to put even in that space to say, what does Jen's happiness look
that's
like,
mhm,
not just what is real estate investing. And that to me, I think was a big shift for us to say, hey, we're not going to take just the most sacrificial life option to bring in the most amount of money. We
that's
kind of
right.
took a step back and said, hey, we need to really look at what is Jen's quality of life and what can we do there first. How did you feel about making that shift from all about the money to really kind of all about Jen?
Ah, and I appreciated that because I would do whatever it took, right, to keep myself safe. And if that meant
Mhm.
sacrificing, right, if I had to tiptoe around guests or tenants, then that's what it meant. But
Mhm.
having the permission to be like, well, it's not all about the money part or the real estate part, right? Keeping myself safe also could look like being in a single family home, right? It just may
Right.
take a little longer to get to my 5 doors than I originally thought. So that's when we pivoted to single family as my next purchase. And that
Right.
was also be in San Antonio.
Now, how did that search go? You started looking in San Antonio. Tell us what happened there.
So it was very specific to a school district because then I'm looking at the end goal, right? Always looking at the end goal because, like, okay, I'm going to have this property. Eventually, I'll rent it out. Which, by the way, my friends and family chuckle at me because they're like, "Wait a minute, you just moved. Why are you thinking about leaving again?" I'm just like, "No, that's. I mean, I'm always looking at the end goal. So I
Right.
have to be careful about who I tell that to now." Because they're like, oh my gosh, are you going to move again? I'm like, well, maybe. I mean, so I looked in San Antonio at a certain school district and actually found a place and I put an offer in and we got some inspections done, and the foundation was off. And they wanted to spend, so the option period was ending soon. They wanted to spend some more time doing their own analysis. So the option period, we extended it for another 7 days. This, by the way, all of this time from a realtor standpoint, it takes a lot of time, so I know there's a lot of talk right now with commissions, and
Hmm.
realtors work a lot on transactions. It is
Yes, they do.
not, I mean, it is.
It's not just opening doors.
No, no, there's contracts, there's discussions, there's title companies, appraisers. I mean, it's a lot that goes into that. So the time that it took, then we decided to negotiate and extending the contract for an additional 7 days. Well, here in Texas, at the end of that seventh day, you have until 5 p.m. Central Time, and it's cut. So
Right.
if you don't negotiate something, either the contract stays in place or you terminate the contract. Well, they decided to schedule their second opinion on the day that the option period ended at 2 p.m. Central Time. We still have the inspection that needs to happen, and then the communications with the seller. I was like, oh my gosh, this is too stressful. So, anyways, it came down to the wire, and it was one of those things that we couldn't agree on it. And I was not going to enter into a transaction that would have been 50,000 plus in repairs, and the seller was like, there's no foundation issues. I was like, I can't with you. Like, so I terminated the contract. I was so proud of myself, but very sad, because now I really felt lost. Where do I go from here? What's next for me? I mean, looking back, of course, I can laugh at it, right? But at the time, I just remember, this is a pivotal moment. I was sitting on the steps in my backyard, and my little dog was running around, and I talked to my dad, and I was crying, and I just was like, I thought this was my next step. And he was just like, daughter in Spanish, he was like, this wasn't the right place for you.
Mm.
And I just remember the warmth and the connection that I had for my dad. Like, we didn't always have that. And he's had some health issues recently. And I was like, that's when the thought entered about a different market and moving closer to where he's at. I once heard someone say, go where it's warm, where you feel warm and loved and supported. And I was
Yeah.
like, my family's here, my mom and my sister. And I was like, let me just entertain the idea of moving to Houston. And that's when I talked to you.
Yeah.
And you said, we're going to think of it as expanding our market, right? We're just going to look, because it was too
Right.
daunting for me to, it would be a little bit further for my kids. And it was like, I didn't know kind of what that would look like. And I wanted to be very thoughtful and cautious about moving to another city. I mean, I just moved to San Antonio, it had been a year and a half. And I was like, okay, what am I doing here? Is this the right move? So I wanted to take some time to reflect,
Hmm.
in addition to analyze, right?
So yeah, we didn't jump into that. It wasn't like, ooh, okay, switch,
Mm-mm.
right? Okay, total
No.
pivot. We said, okay, let's start looking into that. Let's start investigating. We went back a few steps, kind of went back to market research, right? You made sure also to speak to your father, once again, being a realtor in the area. You thought about a couple of those life changes and what that was going to look like. And I loved the fact that you really took that step back and said, hey, let me really think this through and do my due diligence, not from just the numbers side and just the cool, can I make money here, but also an emotional side. How am I going to feel leaving some of the friends that I have built here, being a little bit farther away from my kids, but now being closer to my father now? What was that going to really look like? And I think you did a great job of kind of creating up that balance. And then you really kind of came back to me and said, hey, I'm kind of feeling good about going back to Houston now. So, what was it like then, especially now being hours away, looking at properties now in Houston?
Yeah, I mean, that was that was an adventure in itself as well. So once I made the decision, like, and even then I presented it to myself, because I needed to do that. Like, I'm just
Hmm.
looking, right? Knowing that if I found the right place, I was going to put an offer in. Like, I was looking at single family homes as well in the Houston area. And I was looking at areas that I was used to when I lived here many years ago.
Hmm.
And homeowner insurance rates have changed quite a bit. Yeah, and it's, I mean, before we knew we needed it, absolutely. but it didn't really change our decision about which market we were going to get at. We're just like, oh, we know we need it and we're going to add it on. Well, it's a little different living in a coastal city because there are certain areas now that I learned this that insurance companies won't even cover them. So the area that I was looking at, that I was used to and familiar with, I did not want to put myself in a risky situation of not being able to get insurance. And
Right.
that's not safe. So there's been a lot of interesting things that happen. So remember that conversation you and I had. And
Yeah, there was a very big difference with that. For anybody else that has not listened to our episode about insurance, we actually just had an amazing episode with Elena Jesse. So if you've not heard that, all about what's going on in the insurance market around the United States right now, head over, take a listen to that other Lady Landlords podcast. But Jen, you then decided, okay, there's some other places that I can kind of go to in Houston, really kind of started to investigate what that was going to look like. And then you come back to me and said, hey, I think I want to get a multifamily. I think I'm going to house hack. Walk me through that, because weeks before it was like, nope, not doing it, not going that way. But then we revisited it.
yeah, I mean, in the end, I think from a financial situation to reduce my monthly expenses. I mean, we know from just hearing, right? Like usually housing is what on average 30% of your income. So, usually you can cut back on, you hear about, financial gurus saying cut back on coffee and
Right.
your biggest line item is housing. So I saw the writing on the wall and I'm just like, if I really want the flexibility, in the future from a financial standpoint, it's like, well, this is going to make the most sense. Like as hesitant as I was about it, I was like, you know what? I can make it work. So,
Well, I think one thing that actually had helped by that point in the time of your journey here was that now you had the long-term tenant. So you didn't have a different person over your head every other day. You didn't have, great, 1 week a short-term rental tenant was not a great guest. The next was a great guest. The next one was kind of mediocre, right? Now you had a point where it was, okay, you had that stability, you had somebody that was there. So I think that that probably helped a little bit kind of along the way, saying like, okay, now this was a better setup. So let me now look into kind of doing that again. One of the other things that we made sure to talk about quite a bit was that this was not going to be your forever home that we were looking for. This was not going to be the place that you had to commit to for the next 30 years. This was something we said, hey, this is the way that we're going to look at this for the time being.
that's
This
right.
is going to, and we're going to try it out and see how we feel about it. And there's plenty of options on the back end. If we say, hey, this really, now we know house hacking is not for us. So you went and you ended up finding that duplex in Houston. So tell us about it.
Yeah. And that was an adventure in itself. It came on the market. I'd already been looking and it came on the market and it was a Thursday. It was a side by side duplex, which was actually quite different from the San Antonio duplex.
Right.
And
Nobody on top of your head.
no, nobody on top. And I was like, and there wasn't a shared wall because in the middle are the two garage spaces.
Right.
So I was like,
Hmm.
okay. I mean, I can keep going, the location and all of it. So, but it was on a Thursday. And I know I'm in real estate, you have to act fast. So the beautiful part, I called my dad and I said, Dad, what do you think? I sent him the property. I said, do you think it warrants me to drive? And I would have to drive to Houston tonight, go look at it, and then put an offer in. He was like, Mija, I got it. I'm going to go and look at the property for you and I'll FaceTime you. I was like,
Aw.
I don't know. I didn't even have that on my mind. So he went and
I think
saw
we
it.
talked about that actually. Sorry to interrupt you. I think we talked about that on an inner circle call, because I remember saying to you, I'm like, you said like, oh, well, my dad's going to go see it, but I feel like I'm kind of going into this like blind. And I said to you, I'm like, well, how old's your dad? Like, does he have an iPhone? Does he have like, and you were like, yeah, he knows how to use like Zoom. He knows how to use, like FaceTime. And I'm like, so then just have him show you.
Yes,
Just
you
instead
did.
of
I
just
remember
calling.
that.
I was like, just have them click the FaceTime button. I was like, not everybody's parents know how to do that. I could drive from New York to San Antonio faster than trying to explain to my father how to use FaceTime. Sorry, Dad, but it's true. But like you were just like, yeah, like we do, like he totally knows how to use that. I was like, great, have him just click the button and make your life easier.
Right.
Right. I remember you being like, oh yeah, that's much easier.
Yeah, I know. Yes, I do remember that. I was like, yeah, I'm going to buy a property site and see. And you're like, well, you don't really have to do that. You're like, you can
Right.
still see it. So yes, thank you for that. And then, oh my gosh, I loved it. But the beauty of being also a realtor is that I can put in an offer in 30 minutes. I'm not having to wait on anybody. As long as it takes me to fill out all the information and
Mm-hmm.
and send it. It's beautiful. So I got that sent over. I ended up losing it, and it was a whole thing. It was just I was just like, "Oh my goodness." I lost it to another potential buyer. They were in the contract, and it just and then the following weekend my dad and I went to go look at so many other properties. None of them compared to this property. So I text the realtor and I'm like the squeaky wheel, right? I'm persistent. I was like, hey, if anything falls through, I'm here. I'm ready to go. Um, my dad is just as persistent as I am. He decided to come to the property and the realtor was here and they talked. And she made a comment. She said something like, oh, yes, I've been talking to your daughter quite a bit.
I like the phrasing, right?
And so then Monday came around and she called me and said that contract fell through and I put in my offer right away. Yeah. I was just like,
Right.
let's make this happen. And I did.
And you closed how long after that did you end up closing on that property?
I think it was right at 4 weeks. So, which is pretty quick. I mean, you got to get appraisers. There's a lot that happens from offer to, so I offered March 19th and closed April 15th.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it was very fast.
And that's hard to do in real estate.
And not something necessarily that we could do a whole different episode on, all about the things that kind of pop up right before closing that people kind of go through. But you got there. You were able to work with the team that you put in place, not just your father, but also the lender that you had, were able to get through and get to that closing. How did that feel then at closing?
Oh my gosh. I I was so grateful on so many levels, right? Like it's never just kind of I'm not on an island, right? Grateful for you and the team and then also grateful for my dad and then just everything that came into place. Like I was just in full gratitude. And so sitting in that gratitude and then it was like and then I had an oh no moment. But no, because I knew that this property, because it was in a beautiful location, I got it at a great deal because it needed work. And
Right.
so I was like, oh, a full rehab on both sides. Am I ready for this? But having the support of my dad and his team, I made the move about 6 weeks after I closed.
Right. So now, and I know we only have a couple minutes left here, but I know that then you closed, you had a lot going on. Now you had to move.
Yeah.
Now you had to start the rehab. Now you had to get your current place also up and ready. There was a little bit of work you wanted to do there, but also get
Yeah.
that
Hmm.
that ready. How was it kind of juggling all of those things and across also two different cities?
Oh, it's been a lot. Yes, I had to get my unit rent ready and listed and managing the rehab from here, working with my dad who was boots on the ground managing and I'm working on the budget because that's what I do and making sure everybody gets paid and all the things. It's been really interesting. And then also going through the emotional part, right? Of feeling like I'm going to be away from my friends. It's going to be very different. And then my kiddos and my daughter-in-law. And it was just trying, but knowing that I was also going to be entering into this other realm of being with my family. So there was a lot. It wasn't just the to-do list, it was also the
Hmm.
emotional kind of feelings that I had that went along with that. So it's been a lot and I'm taking it day by day. I've been in this place almost 4 weeks now in my home on my side. And I just decided to rehab the kitchen. I say just, but I was living in the construction zone, working remote, managing the other rehab on the other side, animals. I mean, oh, my refrigerator was in the living room.
Yeah.
I mean, but there's now some normalcy is coming into play. The cabinets were painted, the
Good.
electrical was done just today. So I can unplug my refrigerator from an extension cord that went into the living room.
Right.
I mean, but I wanted to make sure like I took pictures to capture these moments. Like
Good.
these are the things that make us stronger as lady landlords, right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, I just went through this thing that I didn't think that I could ever do, like rehab a property while living in it. Don't recommend doing that. But on a budget, it works great. But if you have unlimited funds, do it ahead of time. But I was working on a limited budget. And then also, whatever you think that you're going to budget for a rehab, you just scratch through that, add a new number, and whatever you think that new number is going to be, scratch through that and add a new number. So, as a lady landlord, being able to be flexible, right? And that's, I think, a key word because
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be a single family home in San Antonio. Luckily, you and I worked together. I was able to pivot to a new market and then being able to live in a rehab. It's all about flexibility, right? It's like you think life is going to turn out in one way. And I mean, if you were to ask me 5 years ago, a year ago, are you going to be moving back to Houston? I'd be like, oh,
Now, are you going to be living with your tenants?
no. So it's been a journey for sure, but all worth it. I
Right.
love, love, love real estate. I love being an investor. I love being an agent. It's just been a beautiful, beautiful experience. So,
Now, the last question I have for you, and I understand not just work in progress as who we are as people, but also from a rehab and from a real estate perspective. But one thing that I also want to make sure that was important, because to me, as I've said before on these podcast episodes, is that this is not always just about real estate investing and the money coming in and the dollars and the cents and the bottom line. But my last question to you, and once again, understanding there's still things that need to be settled, but Jen, are you happy?
yes, I'm so happy. I'm like, I mean, I couldn't have said that. I didn't say that, right? Is life perfect? No. I
No.
mean, does life have its ups and downs and a wish, but I once heard that, happiness is having everything you need, but it may not be everything you want right now. And that's exactly it. I have everything that I need and I'm so happy. Yes.
I love that. That to me is almost more important than some of the other like real estate stuff. I love that it came together. I love that it was combining really a lot of the things that you do love with family, with real estate, and kind of combining all those together. But really at the end of the day, getting that quality of life and going through some of those transitions you have over the past years, that to me is kind of the highlight and the thing that really kind of sits with me with
Yeah.
your journey in this. So Jen, thank you very much. I appreciate you so much joining me today, sharing your story, and inspiring so many other lady landlords. So thank you again for doing this for us.
Yes, I appreciate you, Becky, and all the work and the patience. But then you also like come in and be like, nope, you need to do this. I was like, oh, yes, that's why I love it. But so I appreciate you help, getting me organized in my brain with all the thoughts that I have. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Happy to do that.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see where you go next. But Jen, thank you very much for joining us today. For all of our listeners out there, do please make sure to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss the next episode of the Lady Landlords Podcast. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please do make sure to leave us a 5-star review. 5-star reviews help other women be able to find our channel and be able to get the support that they need also in their real estate investing journey. Thank you very much and see you on the next episode of the Lady Landlords Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Lady Landlords Podcast. If you're feeling stuck in your real estate investing journey, visit lady-landlords.com to book a 15-minute orientation call with me and see if you're ready to join our mentorship program. Or you can subscribe to our newsletter and join our Facebook group for exclusive real estate investing tips and offers. Invest with confidence. Become a Lady Landlord today.